So today is all about walking with your dog. Um, so I want to start with who am I and why are we here? So my name is Mike Purcell. I am a lifelong Philadelphia resident, originally from Northeast Philly. I've been down in this area for the last 10 years. A little bit about myself is I am an Air Force veteran. I am a Penn State alum. I've owned this business now for about 4 years. I've been working with dogs in various capacities for about the last 8 years. So really what sets me apart from other trainers in the city, in the country even, is I have a formal education. So I am a certified professional dog trainer, which means that I have gone through courses and extensive testing on the psychology and physiology of canine behavior, and then also all sorts of education specific to training dogs and communicating with dogs. The other thing that I have, right, and that makes me a reason to listen to is my experience, right? And certainly all sorts of dog trainers have experience. That's where that certification sets me apart from them. My specific certification, the highest one I have, is held by about 200 people worldwide. So it's not something that I just kind of decided I wanted to do one day. It is very much something that I have studied hard, read a lot, and read a lot of scientific research. My experience, as far as owning this business, I have over 2,000 hours of training hours over the last 4 years. I've helped train tons of dogs and coach a lot of people, and really that is what I look to do, is because I tell people all the time, you do not need your dog to respond to me, you need your dog to respond to you, right? So it doesn't do you any good to just say, hey Mike, here's the leash, train my dog and fix this behavior, because I can work through that with the dog. However, when I hand the leash back, you're gonna end up in the same situation that you started in, because everybody's communication with the dog is going to vary, even within the same household, right? So like you and Clayton's communication with Buddy is going to be slightly different, even though you may try and be very consistent with each other, using the same hand signals, the same words. So everybody kind of has their own communication style with their dogs, no different than with other people. Another reason that I think people like to listen to me is you can just Google All Canines. Our reviews they're fucking amazing. Like the things that people say about working with us, they speak very highly of us. We did win Best of Philly in 2022 and 2023, and I do anticipate that we will probably three-peat. So going back to those hours, right, 2,000 plus hours in 4 years, that helps me be a subject matter expert. But you can also be incredibly good at training and have a very well trained and behaved dog by using the rule of 100. The rule of 100 is about 100 hours per year. It states 18 minutes a day equals 100 hours per year. If you do anything for 100 hours per year, it makes you 95% better than everybody else. And it's just solely based on consistency, because you're constantly learning, you're constantly practicing. So consistency is key when training with your dog, when learning communication with your dog, and then certainly patience as well, because we are going to be working with an animal that does not communicate the same way that we do. Right? Dogs are visual animals. Body language is how they communicate. We communicate via words, right? Dogs don't speak outside of barking or whining, and even then, like vocalizations from dogs is a very, very small piece of their communication. So much is through body language. And even to what we understand, I mean, it really probably is tip of the iceberg as far as the signals that dogs present in situations and how we are able to perceive them and what they mean. So, like I said, I've gone through extensive testing on the psychology and physiology of a dog. This is the psychology of a dog. They have the emotional development of a 2.5-year-old. Now, when you can think of that, understand that you are speaking to a 2.5-year-old that just has a tail, 4 paws, is furry, right? Like I think oftentimes we have this idea of the dog's age, that they age 7 years per 1 year. So, right, so Bella is 7. So we would look at Bella to be, you know, somewhere between 40 and 55 years old, but not developmentally, right? Maybe physically in her body as far as joints and things like that, but developmentally, dogs will not exceed a 2.5-year-old, which means as far as what they can feel, they can feel affection and love, suspicion, joy, anger, fear, disgust, contentment, excitement, right? That's a big one. What they cannot feel are things like guilt. So this notion like, oh, my dog knows they did something wrong, they do not. They're not guilty because they chewed on a shoe or because they picked up a piece of trash on the side of the road and they were yelled at or corrected for doing that. What it is fear. So dogs cannot plan for the future. They do not have episodic memory, which means that they cannot recall isolated moments from the past. They will learn by repetition, repetition, repetition. That heavy repetition and reward for that repetition becomes a conditioned response. But a dog is not isolating specific memories to say, oh, this is why I do things. So it's not that dogs can't learn, but they don't remember the learning process from start to finish. Things like going back to that, like, oh, feeling guilty or pride, shame, right? Any of these emotions that post 2.5 would feel, something like yelling or big postures by us as people, right? Forward movements. That dog that might be slinking down, the ears might be back, the tail might be tucked a little bit. They're not doing that because they feel guilty. They are doing that because of the basic emotion of fear. There's a fear of punishment. We have to remember we are much larger than our dogs. Right? Bella's 90 pounds, but some dogs are 9 pounds. Right? To that 9-pound dog, we're absolute giants to them. So our human body language is incredibly important. The pitch and tone of our voice is incredibly important. Any physical contact in general, whether that be, you know, a smack on the butt, grabbing the collar or the scruff, like the dog's response to all of those human behaviors is out of fear, not out of this understanding that they did something wrong. Dogs don't know right from wrong. They just know behaviors. They do things in the moment, and everything that they do has a purpose. Hey Tracy, how are you? Come on in, sit down wherever you'd like. This is Bella.
Good to meet you.
You just gotta watch out for her tail. She's it's a bit of a whip.
Okay.
So, you know, going back to that emotional development of a 2.5-year-old, when you think of it that way, think to yourself, how would I treat a 2.5-year-old? Would I yell at them or would I try and guide them, right? So things like grabbing, collars, harnesses, quick movements, any sort of leash yanking, potentially causing, pain or discomfort, any sort of correction, it's going to be taken the same way a 2-year-old would take it. So when you are communicating with your dog, it's very important to kind of be in that mindset of like, I'm speaking to a child. I'm speaking to a child who is fairly nonverbal and does not understand me the same way that even a 2.5-year-old human child would, because we're not speaking the same language. Human emotion and body language, voice, they're incredibly important, not only when discussing walks, it's overall. And then we have the physiology of the dog. Now this is, I picked one area of the body, I picked the nose. Dogs are olfactory animals, so their sense of smell, as we all know, is insane. So much so that dogs, when they start smelling something, they always start with their right nostril. They will then shift to the left nostril if that smell is familiar or non-aversive. So things like food, things that they are used to, down to people, places, things. Now, if that smell is not familiar, they will stay right side dominant, and they're smelling out things that might be threatening. Dogs, their smell is so good, they can smell out adrenaline in the air, right? So if dogs have passed a particular area on a walk, and they have left their scent, they can smell adrenaline. They can smell protein in poop. Like, dogs are capable of doing things with their nose that we could never even fathom. And this is all about how the brain controls processing, right? So left hemisphere, behavioral responses to familiar stuff, right hemisphere, all new information processing. Our brains work the same way, right? The right side kind of controls the left side of the body, left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. Now, as far as the physiology goes even beyond that, right, again, I'm not going to go down this deep rabbit hole of, the dog from nose to tail, but super important to think about when we're out on walks, because as soon as you walk out of your house, the entire world to the dog is relatively unfamiliar and new. It changes constantly. You also want to think about where you're walking, right? In an area like this, anybody have any idea what flies by dogs time and time and time again that is right at this level? Car exhaust, right? If you were getting blasted in the face with car exhaust every time you went for a walk, you'd probably buy a treadmill and start walking inside, because I'm sure it smells awful. I'm a prior mechanic in the Air Force. I can tell you that grease, oil, gas, that stuff is pungent, and I don't have the smell receptors that a dog does. So also things like touch. Dogs can tell the difference between a concrete sidewalk versus the asphalt road. So having a dog sit down at corners, the reason that they are able to learn that fairly easily is because they are often given some sort of feedback and information when they hit the asphalt, right? Whether that is a verbal no, or if you are correcting in any sort of way. Granted, my training, my style is not correction based at all, because going back to the last slide, we're working with 2.5-year-olds, right? I would not yell, be physical, or do any of that with a 2.5-year-old. I would get locked up, right? But we do that with our dogs, I think, because we have a slightly wrong idea of what they are in here. We look at them as the physical, but don't truly think of their brains. So touch is important. Noise sensitivities are important. They can hear things that we can't at frequencies that we cannot. And in a big city, right, we're not talking about the rural dog that lives on a farm. You can go online and see all sorts of trainers who are just in big, giant fields, and their dogs are wonderful because they're not dealing with all the fucking distractions that we are. They don't have cars, motorcycles, box trucks, 18-wheelers, all going down this road. The bikes, the other dogs, the squirrels, the PGW tearing up the road and leaving giant potholes everywhere, right? Those dogs do not have to deal with that. Those trainers, those handlers and owners do not have to deal with all of the things that we have to by living in one of the top 5 largest cities in the country. The city dog is so different than the suburban dog and the dog that lives out on a farm. And then climate sensitivities. Some dogs are sensitive to rain. I do like to joke, however, though, that things like rain tend to be, or sensitivities to things like rain, tend to be because us as people are afraid to go out in the rain and get wet with our dog. Like, we don't want to go out and take them to the bathroom when it's raining out. So because we don't do those things, dogs don't experience those things on a regular basis, which then makes them a little uncertain when we try and take them out in those situations and climates. So going for your walk specifically, there is all sorts of things that factor into it. What your dog wears, whatever you're using, is your dog comfortable with that? So, I'm very big on front clip harnesses. So I do have 2 that I really like. This particular one is from PetSmart, and I will, afterwards, when I send the recording, I will send the links to these products just so that you can take a look at them. This one I absolutely love because it does have all of the patchwork ability on it. So as you can see, this is actually my dog Gracie's vest. So I have a big in training, ask the pet, there's all sorts of do not pet me. I love this one. Do not talk to handler, trigger stress, right? Like, I like whipping this one out when I don't feel like talking to anybody. Right, and like, do not pet. So if you have a reactive dog, even if you don't, right? If you just don't want every single person on the street coming up to you to ask if they can pet your dog, things like that to deter people from approaching you are absolutely wonderful, right? And we used to make the joke, Emily and I, when Leah was born, right, walking down the street, nobody's coming up to our 8-week-old baby, 12-week-old baby, and ripping open the stroller top and being like, oh my God, what a cute baby, picking her up, grabbing her, But what do people do when you walk down the street with a 12-week-old puppy? Oh my God, right? And it's like, the dog goes nuts. It almost doesn't even give you, as the owner, a chance to be like, no, please don't do that. And you kind of just get forced to accept it. And then your dog is forced to just have some random stranger put their hands all over them, right? Like, you don't know who that person is, where they've been. If your dog enjoys being touched and pet that way, not for nothing, if we can put ourselves in their own body, if we're walking down the street, some stranger just came up to us and started touching us all over the place, we do live in Philly, that would probably be a problem, right? Like, people would not like that. So, what we put on our dogs is super important. Things like prong collars, choke collars, slip leads, halters. By halter, like these gentle leaders, if any of you have seen them or used them. To preface, before I dive into these tools, I am never one to say somebody that uses specific tools is wrong, bad, right? Just because I don't use corrections in my training, if somebody feels comfortable using a prong collar and direction as part of their communication, that is a choice, right? My viewpoint on it is to educate, go back to that first slide and say, you're communicating with the 2.5-year-old this way, right? If we did that to human 2.5-year-olds, again, we would be arrested. However, because they're animals, we're able to get away with things like that. It does, using those tools are effective. I also, I don't shy away from that fact. Correcting the dog, by yanking, a leash connected to a prong collar is a way to suppress a behavior. It does not teach the dog what you want them to do. And that is the real important piece of that. So if you want a dog to walk next to you, we'll touch that topic a little bit, but for the sake of this, if you want a dog to walk next to you and they start to get in front of you and you go pop and they slow down, if they're not getting corrected when they're walking next to you, but are when they're walking ahead of you, all they are learning is that when they get out in front of you, boom, they're getting yanked. They're not watching you through the whole process of yanking on the leash. They're just feeling that discomfort and understanding okay, the discomfort doesn't happen here. So all you're simply doing is suppressing that behavior of exploration, of curiosity, of wanting to, move away from you and smell things, which is incredibly important for their mental stimulation. And that's with that, right? So certainly things like prong collars, choke chains are adversives to dogs. But that doesn't mean that a harness can't be an adversive either. Which I also think is really important. I don't ever recommend somebody just go go buy a harness and toss it on your dog and they're gonna be, a great walker. No, it's this is a tool, they have to get comfortable and used to it. Dogs don't wear clothes, right? So they need to build a trust and comfort around these tools, just the same way that they should be afforded to with something like a prong collar or choke chain, etc. It's up to the dog to decide what they determine adversive, not us. So I do like to say the relationship to the harness should be built around the dog, not on your watch, right? So if you're in a rush to get out the door because you only have X amount of time to walk your dog, factor in how much time it takes for your dog to be comfortable to put the harness on. That should be part of the walk. If you are in the habit of walking for miles or for distance, I highly recommend that you scratch that and instead you say, okay, I'm walking for 30 minutes, 45, an hour, and your walk starts from the time you go, do you want to go for a walk? Right? And you get that head tilt, dog gets all excited, or the second you're pulling that harness out, the leash out, collar out, whatever it may be. That's when your walk starts. Because every day is also going to be a little bit different, right? One day, your dog might fly into that harness. The next day, they might not. It might take them 3, 5, 10 minutes, right? All dogs are different. All comfort levels are different. Allow that time to get them ready to be part of the walking process. When you do that, especially for a high arousal dog that gets really, really, really excited to put on things like harnesses because they know by association, harness and leash go on, collar and leash go on, we're going outside. We're going to do fun things. So we condition that these tools have a very powerful meaning. So oftentimes dogs can get very excited around that. When you as the handler, the teacher, the guider for your dog, instead of being like, come on, get it, let me, right, trying to throw it on, if you just stand there and just wait and allow the dog to sniff and get comfortable, and then maybe have a little handful of treats, put your hand through, and draw your dog's nose through, that gives them an opportunity to do it at their pace, and then to be rewarded before putting the harness on. Behaviors that are rewarded are repeated. So working on this over and over again with your dog, you can then eventually put this on a verbal cue. And you can go, okay, harness. And this is your hand signal. You're not, fistful of treats every single time. You're developing a hand signal. You're developing communication with the help of food. There is nothing wrong with using food and treats as motivators. If you're not using food and treats as motivators, then what are you using to motivate your dog? There is not one person in this room that would go to work and be happy to leave work without a paycheck. If you were not one person in this room, we would all quit our jobs. We use things like food almost as currency. So even down to kibble, right? Kibble should not, if you don't have to, be placed in a bowl. Use that to train with your dog. Use some of that in the morning and in the evening time in the house. They're probably not likely to take kibble outside of the house, then that's where you use your high value treats. If you're using high value rewards in the house with your adult dog, like repetitively, you're devaluing them when you go outside, right? So use the lowest level that they're willing to work for in the house, and then when you're going outside, when things are more challenging, when there's more distractions, you now have the better treat, the stinkier treat, the thing that is going to motivate them to behave in ways that you want them to. So we not only have the tools that they wear, but we have the tools that we wear and that we hold. Because treats and food are so powerful, I always recommend a treat pouch. There is no harm in having treats on you and not using any, right? Depending on where you're at in your training process. But if you are going outside on your walks without treats, you are setting yourself up for failure, which has the trickle-down effect of setting your dog up for failure. And then potentially leading you to getting frustrated, which has this downward spiral. So I always recommend a treat pouch. I actually don't have mine on me today. What I will say is just a regular fanny pack. Like, I'm not a huge fan of all the different treat pouches that they sell for dog training purposes. Some are magnetic, some are drawstring, some are zippers. Like, just get a fanny pack that you like. Ray Allen Canine makes a really nice treat pouch that you can also, it has an area for a tug toy as well if your dog is toy motivated, because we don't just have to use food in training and teaching, right? We can use play and all sorts of different things. We can teach all sorts of different things through play that sometimes we can't teach by using food. Leash accessories. If you have poop bags, keys, I see all sorts of crazy things connected to the ends of leashes. I think Bella's leash, I don't know where it's at, but it has like a D-ring hook by the handle. If you are attaching all sorts of things to that, please, please, please stop. One, you're making the leash exponentially heavier for yourself. Two, if you drop that leash, and I see this all the time, people go to parks and they drop the leash. Your dog now has this object that is constantly chasing them. Like, that is not going to make the dog feel comfortable. It bounces all over the place, it makes a bunch of noise. When we're talking about things like noise sensitivities and stuff like that, that can be something that causes them a lot of stress. Take that crap off the leash, put it in your pocket, put it in your treat pouch. You wear it, you hold on to it. Don't have your dog hold on to it. And then the big thing that I see with a lot of people is how we hold the leash. So people do all sorts of things when it comes to holding the leash. Some like to loop their hand through and they go like this, surefire way to break your wrist if your dog ever pulls you down. Like, you will be calling me and be like, yep, Mike, broke my wrist, you were right. Right, you're not giving yourself the freedom here should they be big and pull on you. Also, this is a 10-foot leash. If I take this leash and in any way I'm wrapping it up like this to where it's not easily extendable, I just took this 10-foot leash and now made it a 6-foot leash. Most people are probably using a 6-foot leash. If you do this with a 6-foot leash, you now took that leash and it's like 3 or 4 feet. I am not surprised if your dog's pulling you on a 3 or 4 foot leash. You're giving them no space, no freedom to really do much of anything, and you are just going to constantly be in this back and forth with your dog, like them pulling, you pulling, them pulling, you pulling, and you're not going to enjoy the walk. They're not going to enjoy the walk, and yeah, it's almost like, why do it then? So how to hold a leash properly is simply use your thumb, right? You have this nice L/J. Use your thumb, hold it here. Bella's 90 pounds. She could pull me out the wazoo, and I am not losing this grip. And if I did, right, I still have the security here. Strongest point in my hand to hold it right here. You can also go this way if you feel more comfortable with that. Notice, I'm not wrapping it anywhere. I just have a firm grip on it. Right? This leash is not going anywhere. And if it did, I still have the security of the leash in my hand. And then finally, let's just say, your dog did pull extremely hard and you did drop the leash, or the leash slid all the way out. At least if it's here or here and it falls off, you're not breaking any digits and you're not breaking your wrist. And you're not, eating cement. So how you hold a leash is very important as well. Going into human emotion, right? If you're feeling stressed out to take your dog for a walk because it has been a struggle in the past, they are reactive to other people, other dogs. If you're walking around and you're white knuckling the leash, your dog is feeling that. Your dog feels the tension, and your dog doesn't necessarily feel your tension, right? We could argue that they feel energies and stuff like that, but we won't even go there. What your dog recognizes is your body language. So if you're in the house and you're all fun and loose and then you get outside and you're stiff and you're tense and you're squeezing the life out of the leash and you're like, oh my God, and you're super anxious, your dog is going to sense that your body language has changed, right? That you are acting differently. And because you are acting differently, they are going to feel that there is something wrong, right? If a parent is super nervous while out at the zoo with their 2.5-year-old, and parent's anxious as all hell, and that parent is not anxious as all hell anywhere else, the 2.5-year-old is going to be like, how the hell is mom or dad so anxious right now? I guess there is something worth being stressed out about. We also, going back to the dog's nose, we as people, we give off various smells. Fear has a smell. Joy has a smell. Stress, anxiety have smells. Our dogs can sniff that out. And they're able to pair the smells with our body language and our behaviors to understand it as, okay, there's a reason to be scared right now. And then, when we think about being nervous, stressed out, frustrated, anxious outside, and then suddenly a person or a dog enters the scene and we really tense up, well now our dogs perceive it as it's that thing. That's the thing to be scared of. Because dogs are acting on very basic emotions, when they are fearful of something, dogs put their oxygen mask on first. So this notion that like my dog is protecting me is total bullshit. Outside of like German Shepherd does have protective tendencies. However, it's not this idea that like just because my dog is with me, they are there to protect me. Absolutely not. The world is exponentially bigger to our dogs than it is to us. They put their oxygen mask on first, and if they are reacting, it's because they are afraid. Not because they're Billy Badass and they're gonna protect you from whatever it is that's, you know, came around the corner. How you hold yourself and carry yourself on the walk is incredibly important. So, I don't know where everybody is in their training journey, how old everybody's dog is, etc. But are you all familiar just with like basic hand signals, right? Getting the dog to sit this way, lay down this way, right? In order to have high efficiency in that, we want to repeat it almost the exact same way every single time, right? Well, when we go out on walks, and especially today, it's going to be a nice day, watch other people while they walk their dog. Carrying a leash. Right? Like, they're just walking around, not paying attention, or heads in the clouds, like while they walk their dog, and come on, buddy, like, let's go, right? Pulling their dog along with them, having no idea what the dog's trying to do, if they're just trying to sniff the flowers or take a huge shit. Like, you have no idea because you're not looking at the dog, right? If you're staring at things like your phone or anything else and not checking in with your dog, right? We want our dogs to check in with us, right? But how often are you checking in with them and paying attention to them? So that if you recognize something, you can then guide them. Hey, come here, right? Saying your dog's name is super valuable. Getting that response and eye contact. It's very similar to how we communicate with each other. If I'm over here doing something and somebody's like, hey, Mike, and I don't turn around to look at them, what are the chances that they're going to start talking and saying what they wanted to tell me? Probably zero, unless the person's just oblivious and they like to talk a lot. But they're going to wait until I turn around and say, what? Or even just make eye contact with them. And then proceed to tell me whatever information it was they wanted to. Same with our dogs. If dogs are sniffing something and you're like, Scout, and Scout doesn't look up, you're like, Scout, come here, come on, let's go, let's do this. You're having a conversation with them, which they're not going to understand. Also, that dog is mesmerized and motivated by something other than you. So chances are, you're not going to get the response you're looking for. And what we know as people, when we don't get the responses we are looking for, we get frustrated, we get upset. And then we start adding emotion into it. Come on, you know what you're supposed to be doing. Nope, your dog's a 2.5-year-old. Oh, fucking clue. Especially if you haven't taught them what you want them to do. This idea that they know and they know better, it's just not going to work out in your favor. You're going to continue to struggle. And then, I already touched on it, the environment. Rain, sunshine, snow, right? We have 4 seasons here. We were talking about yesterday, sometimes we wish we lived in San Diego, where the weather was beautiful all the time, but we live in Philly, and the Philly weather is all over the place. Springtime, we have all sorts of smells, all sorts of new animals being born, right? Like, it is very attractive to be outside for dogs. We also live in the city. There's chicken bones and trash everywhere, which is motivating to a dog. Why? Because they have incredible noses, right? Like, the pizza crust that's on the ground it's exciting. It smells good, right? And if you don't have treats on you, and if you're not teaching your dog how you want them to behave and respond to you when out on your walks, pizza crust is going to win every single time. And your dog's not doing anything wrong. You're not bringing anything to the table. And your dog is going to be motivated by what motivates them. If you have no currency to pay them, they're going to say, nah, boss, this job over here is much better. And that's what they're going to gravitate towards. So, pulling on the leash. is this an issue for everybody? Just everyone? Pulling? Okay. So, why do dogs pull on the leash? Well, going back to things like tools and stuff like that, the dog could be motivated to move away from you, right? Like, when we go outside with our dogs, we're walking out into doggy Disney World, right? Like, they want the ability to explore. I like to make the joke sometimes, like, 200 years ago, right? Like, what life would have been like. Hell, just go back 70 years. What did people do with their dogs? They opened the freaking door, their dogs left and explored all freaking day, and they came back at nighttime, right? And granted, we have laws and things like that in place now that we can't do that. But dogs are curious creatures. They're also really smart, right? Because they do smell things. They are able to smell good things versus bad things with all of those chemical receptors that they do have in their nose. So, everyone's dog is going to be different and pull for different reasons. So some may pull for that piece of food. Some may pull because as little puppies, they did have all those people come up to them and pet them. And they just think that every single person now that walks by them is supposed to pet them, right? And then when they don't, they get really frustrated and downward spiral. That could lead to things like reactivity, maybe not even on the walk, but elsewhere. We're not going to dive into trigger stacking today, but trigger stacking is just the short of it is if you can think to yourself all of the things that happen to your dog throughout the day that cause them stress, they just add one on top of the other. Think of your own lives, right? If you're the type of person that, kind of always gets up on time and is ready for work and is early, on time for work, and then one day you wake up 20 minutes late, you forgot to put the coffee on the night before, when you get in the car, you spill your coffee, right? Some asshole cuts you off on your way to work. All of these things are making you more and more and more irritable, adding stress, right? And then maybe you get to work and it's somebody's birthday and you're like, oh great, we get to have cake for work today. Good stress is still stress. The brain does not differentiate between the two. All of these things add on top of each other throughout the day. And then, somebody comes by and kicks your chair, turn around, you mother, right? And it's like, you just explode. All throughout the day, our dogs have Amazon packages being delivered to the door. Next door, across the street, we got mailmen, we got sirens, we got all of the things outside that they see, creating stress all throughout the day. So that a lot of times when you do get home from work and you take your dog out, it's 5 o'clock, and then all of these things are outside, boom, you now have a reactive dog because they've been stressed all throughout the day, and we're putting them in really intense environments around a whole lot of different things, so they get reactive. In order, how you can help yourself as far as leash pulling goes is teaching your dog focus and engagement. Start in the house. Start at low-level distractions. Name recognition and recall. If your dog has A+ name recognition and recall, you will save yourself from 75, 80+% of all issues that you could possibly find yourself in. Because even if your dog is a big puller, if they start to get out in front of you, right, and if I was walking Bella and she starts to get 3-4 feet in front of me, Bella, she looks back, yes, I can mark that. What happens when I mark that and I'm going to give her a treat? She's going to bring her ass back to me. And now what's happening is she's not pulling. If she is not able to repeat the pulling over and over and over again, and I am teaching her to respond to her name over and over and over again, what's going to happen is that conditioned response, where she's going to start checking in with me, just to see if it's that eye contact that gets her the mark and gets her the reward. And it absolutely will, right? As we level up in that training, I'll start calling her name less and looking for that eye contact all on its own, so that she learns, hey, when I look back at this guy, he gives me treats a lot of times. And then from there, we level up even further, where the treats become more verbal praise. Good girl, right? Because we're talking to a 2.5-year-old. That's why dogs eat up that baby talk. Who's a good girl? Who's a good boy, right? Like, they love that shit. So we can absolutely use verbal praise as good rewards. How is the strength of your best basic walk behaviors? And by that, recall is absolutely one of them. I would say the second one is a simple touch. Does your dog boop their nose to your hand? Because this is a hand signal, right? So if we're walking and I go, Bella, and she looks back at me and I stick my hand out like this, and she knows, oh, I gotta go target that hand, she's gonna start paying attention to the hand. So now I got her paying attention up here and down here. This is a whole hell of a lot easier for your dog because it's at third level. Especially like summertime when it's nice and sunny out. Nobody in here is going up and looking up at the sun, right? So getting that eye contact from our dogs, sometimes they just don't want to do it, which is totally fine. It's not them being stubborn. It's not them, not knowing how to do it. It's that they don't want to stare at the sun. Like, that's okay, because none of us are doing that, right? But having this very simple hand target down here gives them an area to go to, and it's right by our side. If they're targeting our hand, they're not all out in front of us all the time and pulling. Do you have any motivation for your dog, right? Are you even trying to use treats? Right? I have heard time and time again, oh, my dog doesn't take treats on walks. Well, are you using milk bones, or are you using, chicken from last night's dinner? Because if you're using milk bones, yeah, I'm not surprised. Milk bones are like the saltine crackers of dog treats. Like, nobody's just going out to eat saltine crackers, right? Like, you need to have something that is going to motivate your dog. It's not up to us to decide what motivates them. It is up to the dog. So if you want to play a little fun game at home, take like 4 or 5 paper plates, use kibble and a couple different treats that you have the dog separate, like in another room, place those plates out with a little bit, release your dog, see what they gravitate towards, right? What is the first treat that they go to? And then, increase the sample size. Try again, rearrange the plates, just to make sure that they're not, say, going to the closest plate first, but increase that sample size so that you can say, okay, the last 5 times I did this, they went to this treat every single time first, and went in this order, no matter where the plates were placed. This is the most motivating treat. This is the treat I'm using for my walks. Going back to leash length, right? Are you a helicopter handler, where you are just like always on top of your dog? Because that could make them feel uncomfortable. Petting is not something that I'm going to dive into, but just a little piece about petting. I say don't bend at the hips, bend at the knees, right? Because when we bend at the hips, we're over top of the dog. I like to make the joke. If a Joel Embiid-sized human being walked in this room and went like this over top of us and placed their hand on our head, we'd all be running for that bathroom back there. Whereas bending at your knees and coming down to their level, it gives them a chance to approach you instead of us kind of forcing ourselves upon them. This is much more comforting to a dog, just the same way it is to a 2.5-year-old, right? Adversive tools, we already touched on that. And then, you know, is your dog more motivated by the outside world? Reactivity. Whose dog's reactive in here? Towards whether it be bikes, people, other dogs while out on walks. And that doesn't, reactivity is not just fear aggression. Reactivity is high arousal excitement. Probably everybody's everybody's dog, right? And it's not uncommon. And there is nothing wrong with reactivity, right? Reactivity is based on emotion. If we were to be in here and be like, reactive dog is bad, that would essentially be like saying human emotion is wrong and you having any sort of feelings towards anything is wrong. It's just crazy talk, right? So it's not that reactivity is bad, it's more so something to be recognized and say, okay, how can we change this so that my dog perceives whatever it is that they are reacting to, that trigger, they perceive it to be different. They behave differently when they see it, right? Are they moving towards it and barking, or instead they see that dog in the distance and they look at us, right? And they're rewarded for looking at us. Huge, huge difference. So reactivity is an emotional response, roots on fear, anxiety, frustration, overexcitement. How we would work on it is desensitization and counter conditioning, and both of those at the same time. So understanding what your dog's threshold is, right? For some dogs, it is 5 feet away. For other dogs, it's 50 yards away. And by understanding the point at which your dog reacts, you can then start behind that point and start working on that desensitization to get them exposure and experience with whatever that trigger is. The counter conditioning is creating that positive association. So as far as the emotional roots of reactivity, that fear and anxiety, dogs might react aggressively or defensively towards other dogs or whatever the stimuli is because they feel threatened or fearful. That reactivity at that point is in attempts to create distance with whatever is coming towards them. It's not to protect you. If it were, it would be completely situational, right? That would be based on like somebody approaching you aggressively and then your dog is kind of biting them because that person is approaching you. The argument could potentially be made that they are trying to protect you, but at the same time, they are also going to feel that emotion of fear. So they're going to respond and react out of their own emotions. Frustration. When your dog can't reach something that they want, like another person or a dog. This is a big one I see a lot. Probably more so than that fear reactivity of like barking, kind of lunging towards. It's often comes with like high-pitched barking, whining, and a lot of pulling forward, but not in like the facial features will not appear aggressive the same way that they would in fear, aggression, reactivity. The reason for frustration is because they're on a leash, right? They are trying to get to something and they are restricted from getting to that. No different than us sitting in traffic, which I feel like I've been doing for the last 3 days because every fucking highway in the city has construction going on, right? When we can't get to somewhere in the time that we want to, we get frustrated, we get angry, we start honking the horn, we start flipping people off, and all sorts of things. Our dogs feel that as well. And then overexcitement is probably the most common that I see. It's just a dog that is really excited to be outside because they've spent all day inside, their owner came home, and then 15, 30 minutes later they're going outside into the world, and it's just like Everything about coming home is just party time. So that heightened excitement or overstimulation can lead to our dogs responding impulsively, like not taking the time to think about the training or what conditioned responses they have learned. They're just so excited to get to whatever it is that they're trying to get to that they then start to react. And then if that overexcitement is then paired with frustration, right? And then we got the trigger stacking all throughout the day, you're likely to have a dog that just boils over and explodes. With the desensitization, like I said, you want to first determine the distance at which your dog does not react to the things that they tend to react to. From there, I say move back 10 or 20 feet. Because if your dog tends to react at 10 feet, you don't want to start working at 10 feet because that's where they're reacting. You want to back up a little bit so that you can have that gradual exposure to whatever that stimuli is. It will help you accelerate rather than kind of being stuck at that 10 feet over and over and over again until your dog can finally kind of overcome that 10-foot mark. Start back at 20, 30 feet and help them work through. Also, just because your dog's threshold is 10 feet today does not mean that it will be tomorrow or next week or next month. It does change, right? Emotion changes in an instant depending on what is going on in the life of the animal. Creating positive association, so as part of this counter conditioning. If your dog is reactive to other people or other dogs, right? And again, not just based on a fear and anxiety level. Exposing your dog, right? I am not recommending that you run away or hide behind a car or avoidance tactics out the wazoo. There is a time and a place for them. But avoiding something is not going to teach your dog how to overcome that trigger. You're just going to continue to have to avoid it over and over again. So, expose your dog to those stimuli at distances. Allow them to see those stimuli and then, right, say their name. Look for that response. Look for that eye contact, that focus and engagement with you. Mark and reward that, right? We want to give treats. Using food and play in this is how we create a positive association. Your words at this point, right? Verbal praise, while it will have some value, is not going to likely be enough to create a strong enough positive association in a fast enough time. It might work, but it's likely that it will take you way too long. So food is our friend. So let's make sure that we're using it. The timing is crucial as well. So I want you to make sure that you are rewarding your dogs right after they see that other dog, or right after they see, whatever it is that does cause them to react, right? So if I were a dog and I'm reacting towards other dogs and I see Bella, I look at her and then owner says my name and I look back, right? Yes. I look back at Bella, look back, yes, right? And it's immediate. This is why, if you walk around with your phone in your hand, stop. Please stop. Because you're not going to see your dog looking up at you. I see it all the time. I can't help myself but drive around and watch people when they walk their dogs. They are not paying attention to them. And oftentimes, their dog is actually checking in quite a bit. But that dog is getting zero feedback from the person walking them because that person's nose is stuffed in their phone, as it has been all day. What is so important during that time that people are walking their dogs? I have no idea, right? I hear all the time, I wish I had longer with my dog. I wish I did more. I wish I did that. I wish I did that. Put the fucking phone down and spend that time with your dog. it's what, 30 minutes a day. Like, our dogs are not asking a whole lot of us. They're social creatures. I do joke, they are like Instagram and Facebook and all the social medias. They want our attention. So we give our attention to our phones and computers and stuff like that all day. When we're with our dogs, be with your dog. Because by the end of their life, trust me, you want to be able to look back and say, man, I spent so much quality time with that dog. What a great dog. What a great time it was to spend with that animal. And their memory will live on with you forever. But if your nose is stuffed in your phone, dog was such a pain on walks, right? Like, I love him, but he was a real challenge. Well, were you spending quantities of time with your dog, or were you spending quality time with your dog? There's a huge, huge difference. And then, as with anything, consistency is key, right? Going back to that rule of 100, right? 100 hours a year, 18 minutes a day. People that I work with on a one-on-one basis, I always say, aim for 15 minutes a day of training, right? Where you are actively training different behaviors. That 15 minutes a day will put you damn near close to that 100 hours a year, which will, again, make you the top 5% of dog owners. Your dog will be exceptional. Your dog's response will be exceptional if you give them that time. It's not a ton of time. With desensitization and counter conditioning, your dog's emotional response will change. It is neuroplasticity at its finest. So your dog will begin to perceive and think about those items, people, places, or things that cause them to be reactive. They will perceive it totally differently with consistency.
Should you reward without any kind of stimulus? Like, so if I'm not giving them a command or doing something at all, is it just like, would empty rewards, is that something you shouldn't do?
In the sense of you're just kind of walking and let's say...
I guess I mean more like at the house. So I'm like at the house and I'm just kind of, I want them to, I'm just sharing like,
okay.
Oh, it's treat time, we're having a good time.
Okay. So with that, capturing behaviors is massive. So most people that I speak with and work with are in the habit of kind of overcorrection in the sense of, no, stop, don't do that, knock it off, get down, right? Like, we're always picking out and paying attention to the behaviors that we don't like. And then the behaviors that we do like, we almost ignore, right? And we don't reward them nearly enough for them to be repeated. What we actually do is we give more focus and attention to the behaviors we don't like, which means we are giving extreme value to the behaviors that we don't like. So as a social creature, when you're not paying attention to your dog, when you're not training your dog, and you're home, and they want your attention, they know exactly how to get it. Oh, let me jump up on the counter. Oh, let me grab the shoe. Oh, let me do this, let me do that. Because they know that that's going to get a response from you. But they also know, man, sitting down and laying down doesn't get me jack shit. So why the hell am I gonna do it? But when your dog is laying down on their place, bed, be relaxing, sitting, when you come in the door, not jumping up all over you, those are the times to reward because you're not asking for that behavior, right? It is, for your dog, it's like you have so much trust in them because you have rewarded them repeatedly that all right, they're going to be calm. And because they're calm, I'm going to make sure that I pay them for that because I want to see that specific behavior more and more and more. So there is nothing wrong with like freely treating a dog, right? I would say you don't want to overdo it. Yeah. And what are you using to treat with? Is it kibble or is it that high value treat that you want to be saving for outside?
Right.
So there is all sorts of little nuances that go into this, right? It's not as simple as just like obedience, getting the dog to sit down next to you and do all of those things. The people that do that are using pain and punishment in order to get that. And all they have taught the dog is that if you move from this position, I'm going to inflict pain. I'm going to inflict discomfort, whether that be via remote, whether it be a tool that's around their neck and on a leash. All we're doing is suppressing a behavior. And understanding body language, when I look at those dogs, I can read it like that. Dog fucking hates that person holding the leash. Because they've just learned that if they move, they are going to, essentially get kicked in the ass. Whereas, like, I want my dogs to be able to move freely and be able to act like little children that they essentially are, within reason, right? That's why we do a lot of training and a lot of teaching of like, hey, I want you to be a master at these basic skills. Name recognition, recall, hand targeting, understanding, different verbal cues based on different patterns that we create in walking, a too far or this way. How to do a heel. I mean, I'll teach a heel to somebody and we will not speak that word until we can get that dog to turn around and sit down regularly, right? And it's going to start out with this big sweeping hand motion, and then we're going to keep working on the hand motion until we get here. Okay, we have a super solid heel. Now we'll implement the word. Because otherwise, you're just repeating this word over and over and over again without getting any sort of success. I like to say we don't want baseball batting averages as far as our success rate. 200, 300, that's piss poor, right? Everybody would have failed out of high school 20, 30% correct, right? We want as close to 100% as humanly possible. So capture behaviors at home. It's huge, especially baby on the way.
Yeah.
Things like laying down,
Right.
especially in a particular spot, right, like a bed. That's the perfect time to reward.
Thank you.
Meeting other dogs. So the leash is probably the biggest issue as far as when interacting with other dogs, because the restrictions that a leash puts on a dog does not allow for a proper greeting. If anybody has ever seen dogs greet each other, that's how they do it, right? They're sniffing each other's asses because there's all sorts of information that they can gain about that other dog by sniffing each other's asses. It's not gross, it's not weird. We put that on the dog because we don't walk around sniffing each other's asses, which is okay. Like, we're not dogs. We don't have to do things the same way that they do, and they don't have to do things the same way that we do them, right? How do we meet and interact? Like this, right? I am standing in front of you. I'm not standing like this. We're like this, talking to you. We are making direct eye contact. If you see dogs interact like this, there is a good chance that this interaction ends up in some sort of altercation because it's perceived as threatening. There's a lot of eye contact that's made, right? And any sort of prolonged eye contact is going to make any animal, not just dogs, but also people, any animal start to feel uncomfortable. And because we know that dogs are working off of those childlike emotions, if they feel fear, that's when they will react. This might be my biggest pet peeve as working in this field, is when two people are approaching each other with dogs, and they don't say one fucking word to each other. Not a hello, is your dog friendly, can they meet, anything like that. There's awkward laughing, and maybe some eye contact, and then probably avoidance from the dog owners. They stare at the dogs. as if they are like have any idea of what the dogs are communicating to each other. It's like it's a social awkwardness to where we as people are not communicating with each other, right? Like, speak to the other owner first. Hi, how are you? Is your dog friendly? Hi, how are you? I do not want to interact with you and your dog. There's nothing wrong with saying that. Like, I don't know, and I'm not going to stand up here and say that I do this every single time. I am at fault for this, because I'm human, just like everybody else in this room outside of Bella, right? Like, I make the mistakes sometimes, I feel awkward sometimes, and freeze up, and then afterwards, if Emily's there, I'm always like, why did I do that? Right? I'm like, I know better, right? Like, I do this for a living, like, I should have said something, I should have done this, I should have done that, right? So, I'm not perfect, and I don't expect anybody in here to be, but really start, like, pick your eyes up, look at the other person, and communicate with the animal that speaks our same language. If you are going to allow your dog to interact with another dog, I highly recommend dropping the leash. And if you're not in an environment where dropping the leash is conducive for a good interaction, don't do it. Like, why run that risk, right? Most dog scuffles start to happen when they're trying to do this, but they can't because they're on short leashes and they start to get all tangled up, and because now they're tangled, they're even more restricted, right? And then it just has this whole snowball effect. How strong is your recall? Actually, even to jump, right? Do you know anything about the other dog? Do you know if they're well trained? Do you know if they have a bite history? Or do you feel awkward and don't want to speak to the owner, so you're just going to allow it to happen and you're keeping your fingers crossed that it goes well? And then when it doesn't, you're like, shit, that didn't go well. And then maybe you start to project on your dog because it was the other dog that started the scuffle, but because your dog reacted, you're just going to place that on your own dog. How strong is your recall, and what is your understanding of canine body language? Can you spot when either your dog or another dog is uncomfortable, and then can you remove you and your dog from that situation if there is discomfort? So, right, they're not connected. This individual, Turd Rugus, she actually wrote a number of books that I have up here. This is a great little easy read, all about canine body language, simple signals. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Our dogs have all sorts of different signals based on how they're feeling. Some of them do carry over. So some calming signals can also be, reactions to stress. But having a good understanding of your dog's language is going to help the overall communication between you and your dog. So certainly things like yawning, lip licking, looking away, right? Looking away is an avoidance technique. So it's not even about walks. If your dog's laying down in the bed and you go to walk up to them and you get close and they turn and look away, just remove yourself. Don't interact with your dog. That is their clear sign signal of being like, I don't want this right now. Right? And think about all of the times throughout that day that your dog comes up to you and very much wants that love and affection. Like, they ask for it when they want it. But they also tell us when they don't want it. We're just terrible at understanding that they don't want it. And a lot of times, that dog turns in avoidance, and then the owner grabs the face and cranks it back towards them. Right? If we were to treat our own kind that way, it would be totally different. As far as stress goes, when you are out on your walks, granted, I know we're approaching the warmer months, so you are likely to get some heavier panting, right? But heavy panting, a lot of shaking off. I equate shaking off to that deep sigh, right? you're trying to like get something off your chest. So if you see your dog shaking every 20 feet, your dog is certainly feeling quite a bit of stress. Whale eyes. So they're a little bit harder to recognize when you are walking because we tend to be looking down, right, at kind of the top silhouette of the dog and not really able to see their face. But the face tells all sorts of things about how the dog is feeling. The eyes, the ears, the mouth are super important. How the body moves, is it stiff and rigid or is it fluid? The tail wag. Not all tail wags mean the dog is happy. Going back to the physiology of the dog, right? And the right and left hemisphere of the brain, tail wags will have a bias as far as wagging more to the left or more to the right. And when they wag more to the right, it is like, oh, I know this person. They're familiar, I'm comfortable with them. When it's more to the left, new person, new smells, right? They might be under conflict. They might feel a little uncertain about that new individual. And then certainly the pace, right? Is it super quick and erratic, or is it that like big, sweeping, flowing motion? If you're getting no focus when you're out on your walk, right? Your dog is definitely creeped into the high stress feelings because they are paying attention to whatever it is that they are uncertain about, maybe a little scared about. So you're unlikely to get that eye contact, especially if it's not something that has been trained very heavily. That is all I have specifically as far as approaching walking with our dogs. I want to leave the floor open. And before I do that though, I do want to bring up one thing that I did not put in here, and that is actual walking. So when we take our dogs out for walks, we walk on sidewalks, right? Going back to moving straight forward, dogs do not move in straight lines the same way that we do. Dogs move like this. If you go out into a field and put a 30-foot leash on your dog, this is what they're doing. They're all over the place. They're retracing steps, they're over and over, they're coming back, they're just all over. So, we quite literally put our dogs on leashes, we restrict them from this natural movement, we make them walk in a way that is totally unnatural to them. We put them on sidewalk, which is totally unnatural to them, and then we expect the world of them. We expect focus, engagement, not to pay attention to other things. Don't eat the trash on the ground. Our expectations are insanely high. I highly, highly, highly recommend, if you are having big troubles, especially with leash pulling, reduce the amount of walks that you are going on as far as in the street, and if you can, start going to fields. Use a 15, 20-foot leash, and start to, the title of this class was walk with your dog, right? Not walk your dog, walk with them. Walk with their natural pattern, with grass under their paws. Make it natural and comfortable for them. Teach them that focus and engagement. When you start to walk away and your dog's sniffing something behind you and they pick their head up and you're 10 feet away from them, they're going to start moving to you. Because they're going to be like, hey, wait, where are you going? No, come back. And then as they get to you, turn to walk. Turn it this way, right? By being in a big ass field, you have a 360-degree radius of where you can turn. When you're on the street, you're moving in one direction. When you do sidewalk walks, I highly recommend that you try to replicate this as much as possible by doing paced walkings. So you'll start walking, and then you turn, and then you turn, and then you turn, and then you turn, right? Granted, it doesn't look like this, but this looks a hell of a lot more like this and paying attention to where you're at. When your dog's on a leash, it's a song, it's a dance between you two, right? So like, you need to pay attention to them, you need them to pay attention to you in order to have that really nice walk to where they're just like not all over the place, pulling you to every which way they want to go. So, highly recommend implementing paced walks into your sidewalk walks, but more field walks. Giving them more space. This will help de-stress them because they will be able to smell out the wazoo. This walk is for them. This walk is for us. It's just, that's what it comes down to. So, open up the floor for any questions if you have any.
I have a question.
Yeah?
So using toys as motivation, the only toy Bunny will respond to is almost borderline addiction. It's a ball inside of a ball. Very
Okay.
weird. We have no idea why. We tested out with a couple of different, definitely this type of ball. And she like will not, her focus is like unbroken. Even if she thinks she might have, if you go, we went to a park once with her with it. If you go to the park again without it, she'll look at you and drop it.
Okay.
Would this be something not to potentially use? Because I would get her engagement like that.
Okay.
But I don't know if it's a reward or if it's like addiction.
Do you play fetch with this ball?
Yes.
Okay, so I would say it's an addiction. So fetch is a game that I only recommend playing once to twice a week.
We don't even do that because
Okay.
we realized how she doesn't play fetch with anything but this ball.
Yeah, so fetch is more about, it's two games in one. It's the game of chase and then the game of retrieve. 90% of dogs are A+ at the game of chase. 60% of those dogs suck at the game of retrieve. Like they will just not bring the ball back. So anytime somebody's like, oh, my dog doesn't really do fetch. They like to chase the ball, but they won't bring it back. It's because chase is predatory, right? Something that moves. You ever watch National Geographic, right? The cheetah, the gazelle, right? Like everybody's frozen, and then suddenly, boom, the gazelle just starts sprinting. What does the cheetah do? Hauling ass. Try to kill that thing. Same thing with the game of fetch. Is the dog is simply just waiting for that object to move, and it hyper focuses on it, and that's all it cares about. Which is great if you're in a highly distracting area and you want that focus and engagement from your dog. The problem is because it's such a predatory instinct, that game of chase injects a huge amount of adrenaline into the bloodstream, and that adrenaline can take up to 3 days to dissipate. So if you're playing fetch on a regular basis, your dog is like jacked up on Mountain Dew each and every day, and which can create super high arousal. What I would try is there are toys that have a ball attached to a rope. I don't think I have any here.
She's terrified of those.
If that's the case, then I would say, maybe not use play, or, just continue to work on finding something that she does enjoy, whether it's a small tug toy, but something that you can travel with while you're out on your walks. And if not, use food. Is she food motivated?
Beef liver is our favorite,
Okay.
or the jerky strips.
Okay.
But yeah, I just didn't know because sometimes I'm like, I don't want, like she can also get bored of things, so to switch it up, that's why I asked for the ball.
So with toys as well, toys have value because we give them value. So if you have the toy box for your dog that's just overflowing with things from BarkBox that like maybe your dog randomly grabs every now and then and like tosses in the air, those toys really only have value when you walk up to it and pick it up. Because now your dog is anticipating and expecting that social interaction. So maybe try and grab different toys without like waiting for her to, and just like make it fun, right? Wiggly body, like, ooh, you want to play? Right, that baby voice, get them excited, and maybe Bunny will be like, oh, this seems kind of fun. And it might only be, 30 seconds of interest to start, but the more you make that toy a lot of fun and interesting, the more motivating Bunny is likely to be. Any questions?
I was writing questions as you were talking.
Yeah.
Sorry. In terms of the using different tools, I like tried so hard to make the harness like a really exciting thing, like super high reward value, like in fun environments, only goes to fun places, and she still like as soon as she sees any harness of any kind, not just one we bought her. I bought like 6 different ones on Amazon to try, and she runs into her crate and hides every single time.
Okay.
But her prong collar, she will 100% let you put it on. No problem.
So, and that's where I say, right, like, so just because I don't train using correction, again, it is up to the dog to decide what is aversive and what isn't, right? And like, a lot of dogs do struggle with the feeling of something going over their head. It just might be that she's not comfortable with that. My recommendation would be to try a martingale collar, because like a thick one, I would go for like 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches if you can find it. But at least the martingale it's not about inflicting correction from you. So where, like if she were to get out and pull, the leash pressure that's being applied is her doing, not yours. If you are making any sort of physical movement, then you are applying that correction. I would, only because a prong collar truly, if the timing is not right? And this is where even trainers that use them, I wish they were better at really training timing, because any sort of correction, you need impeccable timing with the dog, because we don't communicate. We can't reason with them afterwards. So if you're off by 1.5 seconds, right, she could, he's a boy, right? Bunny's
A girl.
Bunny's girl, okay. She could see a dog and like start to do something, and if you act irrationally or like you're uncertain and she looks back but you're correcting at the same time she's looking back, well, guess what you just did? You're suppressing the behavior that you want to see the most. So you want to be really careful. That's also why I really like these field walks, because if you put a 15, 20-foot leash on your dog and you're holding it properly, like this, if your dog has a 20-foot leash on and they're 10 feet away from you, can't go like this, right? That leash is dragging on the ground. So it is about like, come on, Bunny, right? And getting her to move with you, rather than I'm going to let her know by going like this that I want her to move with you. I'm going to use my words, my voices, my body language to say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. And then when you get what you're looking for, you mark it and reward it.
Yeah. Luckily, I don't usually correct her all that often, but she pulls her, like it's all on her, like she'll pull forward in it.
Sure.
And when I use anything else, she'll actually pull worse.
Okay.
So I don't know if she just is like, oh, she's part Pyrenees, and I know that they're and husky, both stubborn. So I didn't know if.
So going back to
our first chart, they don't feel stubborn.
Right. Oops.
Or I guess their just arousal state is much
Absolutely.
higher.
Like stubbornness is just not something that a dog is capable of feeling. And it's not, right, it's not me being like, I'm just gonna claim this. No, like PhDs, the scientists that have researched over and over and over again, done brain scans, right? Like Also the anatomy of a brain. There are parts of a dog's brain that are exactly like ours. Dogs also have different parts of the brain, or don't have different parts of the brain that we do. Whereas we are able to feel these things, guilt, shame, and contempt, and pride. Dogs are they're simply not capable of it because they don't possess the brain parts to be able to feel that way. So, yes, it's unlikely that she's being stubborn.
Or tolerant to
Yeah,
just not bothered.
absolutely, and no different than people. Dogs are going to have different pain tolerances. Some dogs have insanely high pain tolerances to where a prong collar, like you could correct as much as you want, dog's not gonna give two fucks. Doesn't care, right? Like, and that's where it really does come down to, like, if that dog doesn't care about being physically corrected, you have to teach them through reward, because you're not going to suppress the behavior. If anything, you're gonna get excitement, arousal. You're gonna agitate them, and make it worse for yourself. But I would highly recommend this, so that a lot of pulling is just based on rehearsal of pulling, right? If you're walking down the street and your dog is in the habit of pulling, and they're able to get to every single thing that they want to by pulling, they are successful at pulling, right? That behavior is being rewarded, as opposed to if you start walking and they're pulling and you stop, and right, the environment then shuts down where they're at by pulling, and then you only start walking again when they release the tension on the leash. They start to learn, oh, we're only moving when there's no tension, right? And that is the behavior and the habit that you want to rehearse more and more, which you absolutely can based on this. And even the pace walking. With the pace walking though, I would recommend a 10-foot leash, because the standard 6-foot leash is, once your dog, like these are 4 feet apart from each other. A dog that's 4 feet away from me, when I go to turn, right, they're already moving in that direction. Chances are I can't even do a full turn before there's full leash tension. Whereas that 10-foot leash does allow for a little bit of expansion. And really, like, your walks shouldn't be at 4, 5, 6, 7 o'clock when everybody's out, right? Especially if you're experiencing these things. You want to try and find times, if you can, when it is low-level distraction, where you're not going to run the risk of encountering things that your dog might react to. If you're putting yourself in those situations, you have an uphill battle.
I'm trying to formulate it. So whenever you are coming up against something that you're in that threshold and you're on the walk, there's somebody coming towards you with another dog, and what's the best response? Do you walk out of the pathway? Do you stop? Do you
Recall.
You recall.
Come to me, right?
Okay.
Come to me and then start walking again. Come here. Start walking again, right? Because at that point, you know that they're going to get closer and closer to you. But if you can maintain your dog's focus as they're approaching, chances are, like, once they get close, you can be like, okay, come on this way.
Right.
And, you know, you can speed up if you need to.
Right.
Also, as far as treats go, so I have just unlocked a whole new level with our dog Gracie, right? If you don't want to carry around a treat pouch, as far as like a fanny pack, highly recommend something like this. Now granted, be very careful. Like, I went through Target the other day and I picked up every, what am I trying to say? Every protein, so every animal packet, and looked at the ingredients. A lot of them do have ingredients that dogs should not have. Things like onions and...
It's baby food, just to like...
It is baby food.
Food.
Oh yeah.
Baby food pouches.
Baby food pouches. Some of them do have items in there that dogs shouldn't have, especially if they have like stomach sensitivities. This one is just sweet potato, beef, water, and kale. All things that dogs can have. So, but these things are great because you can pop the lid off, give a little taste, put the lid back on, throw it in your pocket, right? Like you have the treat with you everywhere you go. You don't have slimy, hands, things like that. So these can be really great. When you are in that situation though with another dog, right, going down to our body language and posture, teaching your dog in the house to walk with you is super effective. Like a walk is a walk is a walk. I don't care where you're doing it. It's all about walking. So, right, and creating hand signal. So if you teach your dog, oh, this way, good girl, right? I have not given her one treat at this point. She just knows that this hand signal means to walk with me. Good girl, this way.
Okay.
Yes, good girl, right? So now if you find yourself in that situation where there's the other dog, and you're like, oh crap, come here. Good girl, this way. You kind of keep doing this back and forth. Come here. Good girl, this way. And now the dog's approaching. Good, now let her have those pieces.
Okay.
Right, and that's what's getting her by. It's not something that is meant to last forever, right? To where I need to carry, I need to have the treats in hand every single time I pass a dog. What you're doing is you are establishing a hand signal. In time, this can simply mean, this way with me, whatever you want to put, whatever cue you want to put it on. Mm-hmm. You can say, too long, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, right? Like it doesn't matter. I can teach a dog to sit by saying potato chip if I repeat the process of sitting over and over again,
right.
And then suddenly I go, potato chip?
Yeah.
Like it's, the word essentially doesn't matter. It's the behavior that the dog is performing, it's the timing that we are marking, right? So as soon as the butt sits, yes, and then I'm giving her a treat. All of those things are what are truly important. Mm-hmm. So yeah, don't be afraid to use those treats and guide Rue, I'm assuming?
Yeah. Okay.
Don't be afraid to guide Rue along. It's really what it is. You are establishing what you want her to do. Mm-hmm. You have to do that with some sort of motivator. Otherwise, whatever's approaching, whatever's around her is more motivating, and she's going to gravitate towards that.
Right. Okay. And is there any time you should put tension on the leash?
Ideally, the dog does all of that, right? And whereas, like, if she pulls out and the tension is created, you just hold it there. What you could do, because if leash tension is already created and you're not getting any sort of response, I mean, you could literally just like turn your hand the tiniest little bit, right? Because touch sensitivity. She's going to feel the pressure on harness, collar, whatever it is. She is going to feel slightly more pressure when you just kind of turn your hand the tiniest little bit. Oftentimes that will simply be enough to get a dog to redirect. And then when they do, good girl, right? You want to make sure that you are giving feedback. I mentioned, like, we're constantly pointing out the things that we don't like, but not enough are we giving feedback for the things that we do like. Good boy, good girls, they are valuable. They might not be a huge reward, but they at least let our dogs know that they are moving in the right direction. I kind of refer to like the game hot and cold, right? Like I use no like in my training, right? No is a non-reward marker. It's not like no, not yelling. It's just no, nope, right? Like things like that. It helps the dog understand, oh, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. What should I be doing instead? Good is like, you're getting warmer, right? Good. It's encouraging. And then yes is like, you're hot. You found the item or you found the location. And that's when you are rewarding. And that's what teaches the dog, oh, okay, this behavior, this movement is a good thing. I'm going to do this more often.
Okay.
Any more questions?
I have another question.
All right.
When on a leash, let's say like at a just cafe or waiting outside of a building, usually I really only do when seated. Sometimes Bunny will become reactive if another dog walks by. It's not every time, it's only sometimes. And the only thing that I could maybe pair it with is when a dog makes eye contact with her when she's down at my side.
Sure.
Specifically on the side.
Okay.
If the dog makes eye contact with her, that would be a more likely case scenario for her to like,
Sure.
and she doesn't like super bold, but she gets loud at another dog. And it's only if they're close. It wouldn't be like across the street. Either.
Okay.
Is this like a issue with like being, because when she's on off leash, she doesn't seem to care all that much.
Okay.
But it's only when seated.
Okay, so the nature states fight, flight, or freeze, right, for all animals. When you put a leash on a dog, you take flight completely out of the equation. They can't run anywhere. Some dogs will try, especially like the little ones. They tend to try and like run behind their owners, and you can see they like tuck their tail. Little ones become really compact a lot of times. So dogs tend to have either freeze or fight. That fight is based off of these basic emotions. Could be she's angry, right? It could also she's afraid. The smell of the person or the dog, right? Yourself. Maybe whenever I hear dog does it with one person but not always with the other, I say we gotta look in the mirror. Like there is a difference between the two. Is it that you are on heightened alert, right? Like you're looking around, anticipating that dog kind of coming out and approaching. Or maybe you're cool, calm, and collected that day, which is why she's not, reacting sometimes. Maybe it's the other owner. It's walking by, it's like, oh shit, there's another dog. Like, oh no, I don't know what to do. And they start to clench up, right? And they get stressed. And depending on the direction of the wind, maybe Bunny is catching that smell from the person approaching prior to them getting to them. Maybe it's the dog, right? Going back to how they smell each other, they can smell things like sickness, they can smell things like stress from each other, right? Like they learn a whole heck of a lot when interacting this way. So there's no like pinpoint reason as to why or why not. There's a multitude of potential reasons. What I would say is it's more about being proactive as the handler, right? And like being like, oh, okay, somebody is approaching, Bunny, she looks up, yes, right? Treat, Bunny, yes, treat, like, and just repeating that over and over and over so that she starts to understand when person and dog are approaching, where's the biggest benefit? Is the biggest benefit on me lashing out and barking and reacting, or is the biggest benefit me responding to my name and looking up and getting the beef liver treats that I now no longer get inside, right? Through that's when we can start to change, right, the desensitization and the counter conditioning. Really, that's would more so be the counter conditioning piece of creating that positive association with that approaching person and dog. And you're capturing that behavior too. Like if she's sitting or laying down, like you're not having to ask her to lay down. You're not like stay. Also like don't do that, because if you ask your dog to stay and they haven't moved, why the hell are you asking them to do it again? They haven't moved. Like they are already staying. So you're just like repeating the word over and over again. You really want to try not to repeat words. You devalue the word. I'm going to use sit as an example because I see and hear this all the time. Right? So I'm just going to put 4 up there because I don't feel like writing 7. But if you're like sit, and the dog sits on the 3rd one, and you mark and reward that, and you are in the habit of repeating over and over again, and you got 4, 5, 6 sits, and you're in the habit of marking and rewarding 3, 4, 5, 6, you are conditioning your dog to sit the 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th time you say sit. So what you want is the first one, you will never achieve that because you're not being patient enough to say, sit, and then waiting for a response. We are so quick to be like, I didn't get it immediately. So now let me say it again. And let me say it again. And let me say it again. And then as we say it more often, emotion kicks in. Frustration, right? So it starts as sit, 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 sit. Come on, sit, right? And then we can start having like a whole conversation, right? Pitch, tone, number of times, when we mark. There's so many little nuances that go into it as far as creating that very effective response from dogs. So when she is staying, stay. Good, give a treat. Good, give a treat. You're good, that's a marker, right? Use markers, not the verbal cue, that the behavior that you're looking for, especially if they're already doing it.
What's your take on puppy tail chasing?
Puppies,
5 months old German Shepherd.
Wow.
I don't know how I would train my last one. I guess I forgot.
it's funny, when I was doing some work on this last night, I was reading something about tail chasing, just kind of breezed over it. Tail chasing tends to be excitement, arousal, or boredom. Like the dog is looking to occupy themselves in some way, shape, or form.
At its worst, it's accompanied by very loud barking at the tail and chasing it.
Okay, yeah, so I would say like that's definitely a high arousal. That is where I would say, right, it's not something to necessarily try and stop.
Too late.
So, going back to giving certain behaviors value, things like jumping up on counters, jumping up on people, when we make a big deal out of those behaviors, we give them value to the dog. As opposed to, if I put food up on this ledge and Bella started to show interest, rather than being like, no, get away from that, I would say, Bella, come here, right? I'm going to introduce behaviors that I want to see over and over again. So, for your puppy, granted, 5 months old, like, one, you can teach an old dog new tricks for sure. Two, if you've been doing something, since you got your pup, there's nothing to say that you have broken that dog because you have developed this habit, right? You can cut that habit and develop a new one. So if they start chasing the tail, come here, right? Call them to you, grab a toy, start playing.
That's what I've done. The dog is actually bright enough. I say, no, toy. He'll stop and go get a toy and bring it to me.
Okay.
But then, if you don't occupy him constantly, he goes back to chasing.
So that is where I would say mental stimulation, there's probably a lack of just overall mental stimulation. So day-to-day brain games for dogs. So not that we talked about it today, but physical exercise is so different than mental stimulation. If I gave everybody in this room a 1-hour math test versus saying, all right, I want everybody to go for a 1-hour walk, that math is going to kick everybody's ass in this room, unless you're like, just really love math and want to do a 1-hour math test, right? So because we're using our brains, we're thinking, there's a whole process that has to go on, whereas a walk is simply just like, right? Like, you're just bebopping along. It's not physically exerting by any means. Right? When we think about our dogs as far as what they were bred for, right? 200 years ago, even 70 years ago, bred for fast movements, to kill things, to find things, right? To do all sorts of things that we as humans are not capable of. That's why we've had dogs, that we have been domesticating, through a whole process of self-domestication and then human domestication for, 20, 30,000 years. Like it dates back so far. At least 2,000 to 5,000 years where this process of domestication and breeding for specific purposes. So, especially with a German Shepherd, like, it's not to say that a dog needs a job, right? It's like, he doesn't need to be hired by UPS, right? But he needs an activity, he or she. He needs an activity that is going to require him to use his brain, to think through things. So that's another thing that I love about the field. Go to a field, take some food, and just launch it.
Yes.
Have him sniff through and find all of that food. There's treat dispensers.
Yeah, we've tried a bunch of those.
Yeah, like things like these balls.
Yeah.
These can be great. I mean, German Shepherds, from what I find, they really do love interaction. So games like tug and training through play, like that is very, very effective for a breed like that.
I've introduced ball play to him, and now you're suggesting that's not the best idea.
Limit ball play. Tug is so much more valuable. I think it's probably in the back. I have a tug.
We have epic tug wars that go on for like an hour.
Yeah. So
I mean, my arms are longer now than they were.
And that stuff's great. Tug is by far my favorite game to play with dogs because not only can you introduce loads of mental stimulation, but there is a whole physical aspect to it that you will never get out on a walk. I look at the game of tug as more of like a HIIT workout than your leisurely stroll down the street, right? And like that, the reason people like me shy away from HIIT workouts is because they're fucking hard and they're exhausting. And like you can play. I would recommend keeping the play to 3 to 5 minutes, and then putting that toy away. Teaching impulse control, like not this like I want to play, to where you're getting jumping, demand barking, things like that. Hold on to the toy. If he jumps, nope, turn your back, right? And then when he's settled and being chill, yes, right, and then go into the play, right? So that he is the interaction, the start of play is coming from you, not from him.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever heard of this. This is one of my favorite toys.
Oh yeah.
This is a flirt pole.
Yep.
I love these things. This rabbit fur is so gross. But I highly recommend just finding somewhere cheap online where you can get some rabbit pelts and using that. But these are awesome. Again, you can teach a lot of impulse control with a game like this. It's also very prey driven, which I like. I'm big on predatory outlets as far as mental stimulation goes. So natural things like sniffing, digging, chewing, down to that game of tug where it is like you get the kill shake where the dog she does it real hard. She grabs a toy and will just shake the hell out of it. Like those are all very primal instincts for a dog. We want to tap into those primal instincts because it's nature. When dogs are able to do the things that they were meant to do, they have less stress, which overall means less reactivity, means less nuisance behaviors, the behaviors that we don't particularly want to see, because their needs are being fulfilled, right? And it's no different than us. When our needs are not being fulfilled, right, we will start to look for ways to fulfill whatever it is that we feel is missing. Some people use exercise, some people use drinking, right? Like some people go to the movies. Everybody has something different that they might look to in order to fulfill their needs. Our dogs look to us in order to help them do that. So we really want to tap into those primal instincts for them.
So
Oh, and I was going to mention they do make those 2-inch collars and the slip collar.
Yeah.
I've tried just experimented with different things.
Okay. that's great. Like, I'm very, very big on experimentation, right? That's why, like, I had no intentions on coming up here and being like, you gotta use this. Like, who am I to say what you have to use? There are plenty of trainers that already do that. That, you know, meet a dog for 10 minutes and say, all right, we're gonna put this e-collar on them. Like, never even tested the dog to know if that's an appropriate tool for them. Right? Trial and error is huge. Every dog is their own individual, just like every person is their own individual. And the same approach is not going to work for every single one, right? Even down to training, all of us trainers, we're using the same approaches, just in kind of different ways. I think things like that a thicker martingale, right, where the dog is kind of putting themselves in that situation, and it's not us causing that, you know, very direct physical, not to even say pain, discomfort, but correction to it, because correction implies that the dog is doing something wrong. We are the ones that are putting that on the dog, because we are putting them on a leash, which is not natural to them. They're not being asked to be restricted and put on a leash. So we need to teach them, hey, this is how I want you to behave on this tool. And like I said, all dogs will decide on their own what they find aversive.
Yeah, it's funny, my wife bought one of these harnesses, and I looked at it, and I'm like, the hook's too far back. The hook's in the wrong location.
Yeah.
You're pulling him onto his back legs.
Yeah, I do see a lot that do have the hook like at the
Like this
back
doesn't make
end.
any sense.
Yeah, I don't love that. Yeah, I want it closer. I love the front clip, but even with the back clip, I want it as close to kind of the neck as possible. I also, anything with the handle, I love, especially in the city.
Yep.
Even down to collars.
Yeah, I have a collar with a handle too.
Yeah, the flat collars with puppies, like I recommend, right? Get them used to just, you come here, good boy, grab the collar. Because if you find yourself in a situation where it is an oh shit moment, chances are people tend to be more reactive than our dogs are, right? So like, if we're uncertain or unsure, we'll just grab real quick. So if your dog is not used to you grabbing their collar, that could set them off. That could scare them, which could then, right, as I've been saying now, have a snowball effect and cause this whole shitstorm that you did not want to find yourself in. So teaching that recall to collar grab, super valuable. Do you have a question?
Oh, yeah, so I just wanted to summarize part of what you were saying. So like the stress stacking, some of the best ways to reduce the stress that the animal's experiencing is through mental or physical outlets.
Mental for sure. Sleep, insanely important. Sleep is the #1 stress reducer.
Okay.
Like for all animals. So adult dogs should be getting like 14, 15 hours of sleep a day. Now that's not like nighttime knocked out. Like dogs don't sleep that way. You've probably noticed too that like your dog will start sleeping somewhere and then they move and then they move again and then they end up on the bed at some point and then they're off the bed. Right? So they sleep a little bit different than us. But they do have 2 awake cycles, they do have 2 awake periods and 1 rest period throughout the day. The rest period tends to be between the times of 11 a.m. and 2 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if you have a dog walker, think about that. Think about when people tend to have their dog walkers come walk their dog. It's at lunchtime. It's disruptive to the dog's natural sleep cycle.
What is that window?
It's 11 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Is a natural sleep.
It's a natural rest cycle, yeah. So the first awake period tends to start around 6 a.m. and then it peaks around 9, 10 a.m. and then it starts to wane around 11 and then they go into the rest cycle and then, or the rest period, and then about 2 p.m. is when they start to come out of that. By 3 p.m., they're in the second awake phase, and then around 7, 8 p.m., they start to come down and enter that like nighttime rest period. So I always recommend, like if you do have a dog walker, try and get them to come over like 9, 10 a.m. or like 2, 3 p.m. It will be better for your dog long term. You know, you might not see any sort of like immediate change, but that's because they'll have to kind of reset their cycle. Anything in the morning too is also going to set your dog up for success later in the day. So wearing them out, mental stimulation, exercise, play, all of that stuff, doing it in the morning sets them up for later in the day as well.
But I would just for whatever it's worth, you were talking about difference between urban dogs and rural dogs.
Yeah.
For our last shepherd, you know, we have our place here in the neighborhood, and then we have a cabin in Vermont.
Okay.
And man, he's so much easier to manage in Vermont.
Yep.
They see things coming from a mile away.
Yep.
There are no surprises. No one's coming out from around the corner. The distance factor just makes everything easier.
Yeah. And that's like, you know, you can easily go online, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, doesn't matter. You can easily go online and find the trainer who has nothing but space and makes it look so easy, right?
Yeah.
It's because they haven't stepped foot in a fucking city and have no idea the stress and anxieties that not only we as people feel each and every day, traveling around and living, you know, on top of each other, but also that our dogs feel. Like, they don't have to train those behaviors, so they can talk like, oh, I know everything. Like, come on down. Like, come on down, come train with, come work with some of these dogs, because they will find very quickly they're not dealing with the chicken bones, you know, on the street, or you know the grease-soaked napkin, you know.
It's amazing how they find those chicken bones.
Oh, it's, yeah,
amazing.
it's unreal. Thank you everybody for coming out. I hope you got a lot of info. Like I said, I will upload the recording. My fingers are always crossed when it comes to this phone that it did record. So I'll take a look at it and hopefully we got everything. And then if you are looking for, you know, more training, the how-tos, I know we didn't really get into how to do all this stuff, right? Because everybody is different, right? Down to the tools that you're using, down to the body language, down to the words, right? So it doesn't benefit me to say, this is how you do all these things, because a lot of you know, you already have established rapport and communications with your dogs, and I like to capture that. I'm not the person to say, no, you have to do it this way. If anybody's telling you that, you're dead wrong. As a dog trainer, I like to say, it's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, right? So if you are interested in working one-on-one, you can go to our website, allcanines.com, and book a consult. You can also follow us on Instagram. That's where I do most of my like social media stuff. I like to try and put out a lot of educational stuff. That's more my jam. Not here to judge anybody, to tell anybody that they're wrong. I do things the way that I do them because of my education and because of my experience. And it's not to say that I do everything right either. I make mistakes just as everybody does, but my biggest thing is making sure that I'm teaching anybody that I work with how to effectively communicate and live with their dogs. And if you have any questions after this, feel free to email us at info@allcanines.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. This
Yeah.
is very informational.
Thank you all for coming
Yeah.
out. We will definitely be doing more of these different topics in the upcoming months. My hope is to try and do, you know, like 1 or 2 a month, just on, you know, different topics that I see people experiencing, especially with city dogs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, this is great. Just thinking about like, so, you know, I've got 3.
yes, yeah, yeah.